Every story has a beginning. Some begin with a cry, a laugh, or a bolt of lightning. But this story, the story of a girl named Elena, began with an old, weathered diary. A leather-bound book tucked away in a long-forgotten oak chest in the attic. The diary belonged to her father, a man she thought she knew, but who turned out to be a complete stranger. Elena always believed her life was a perfect picture. A respectable father, a gentle mother, and a cozy home in suburban Chicago. Her father, Santiago Reyes, was a brilliant architect, quiet and reserved, but full of love. He passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving an irreplaceable void in Elena's heart. Her mother, Clara, heartbroken, decided to sell the old house and move to a smaller apartment closer to the city center. While helping her mother clean out the house, Elena found the old chest. It was hidden under a dusty tarp, and as she opened it, a musty scent of time escaped. Inside were her father's mementos, yellowed photos, architectural sketches, and a diary. It wasn't a daily journal, but a notebook filled with his deepest thoughts and emotions he never expressed. The first pages were ordinary. They were notes about his work, reflections on life, and the love he had for her mother. But then, as she turned to the middle of the book, Elena felt something was off. Her father's handwriting became hurried, anxious. He mentioned strange names: Isabella, Andrés, El Sol. These names were repeated, like an obsession. He wrote about an irreparable mistake, a secret he had buried for years. A trembling line of handwriting stunned Elena. "They are waiting, in Mexico." Elena reread the line, trying to make sense of it. Her father, a man who had only lived and worked in the U.S., why would he mention Mexico with such anxiety? Her mother, Clara, had no knowledge of these names either. She only remembered that her father had a secret business trip to Mexico more than 30 years ago, before he married her. He never spoke of that trip in detail, only saying it was a failed architectural project and he didn't want to talk about it again. But the diary told a different story. Her father wrote about a woman named Isabella, a woman with eyes that sparkled like night stars. He described sunset afternoons in a small town, conversations under the moonlight, and a love that blossomed quickly. He wrote about Andrés, a child, his son. That line hit Elena like an electric shock, nearly making her collapse. She had a brother? Another family in Mexico? Everything she knew about her father, about her family, seemed to be a carefully orchestrated play. Pain and doubt began to gnaw at Elena's soul. She always believed her parents were a perfect couple. Their love was the most authentic thing she had ever witnessed. So why? Why these secrets? Curiosity won over every other emotion. Elena decided she had to find the answers. She knew this path would be full of thorns and sorrow, but she couldn't live with the fact that her life, her family, was a lie. She had to go to Mexico. She had to find Isabella, find Andrés, and find the truth behind her father's diary. The decision to go to Mexico was impulsive, but Elena had no other choice. She arranged a secret trip without telling her mother a word. Clara was too fragile, and Elena didn't want her to face such a painful truth. The flight to Mexico City was long, and throughout the journey, Elena kept flipping through her father's diary. She was trying to find the smallest clues, any details that could lead her to the place where her father had hidden his secret. The diary mentioned a small town called El Sol de la Esperanza, the Son of Hope. Elena searched online, but there was no information about such a town. Perhaps it was a fictional name, or an affectionate name her father gave the place. But then, another detail in the diary caught her attention. Her father wrote about an old church, a small plaza with a fountain decorated with doves, and a small cafe where he and Isabella used to meet. Elena rented a car and began her journey. She drove through bumpy roads, passing by small villages and dry cornfields. The scenery was unfamiliar, but there was a strange sense of familiarity. After many hours, she arrived at a small town called San Miguel, not too far from Mexico City. This town had an old church, a small plaza with a fountain. Elena's heart stopped. Doves were decorated on the fountain, exactly as her father had described. She parked the car and walked, feeling as if she was traveling back in time. Everything here was old, with a sad beauty. She found a small cafe at the corner of the plaza, where an old man with a wrinkled face was reading a newspaper. Elena walked in, and immediately, the rich smell of coffee and toasted bread filled the air. She looked around, feeling as if her father was here, sitting at one of these old wooden tables. She asked the old man about a woman named Isabella. He looked at her with a scrutinizing gaze, then shook his head. "I don't know her," he said in a raspy voice. "There are many Isabellas here." However, when Elena described Isabella from what she read in her father's diary, a woman with long black hair, big eyes, and a radiant smile, a flicker of light appeared in his eyes. "Ah, the painter's Isabella," he said. "She moved away many years ago." Elena asked about Isabella's son Andrés. The old man said that Andrés had gone missing when he was a child. "People say the boy was kidnapped," he said, his voice full of sympathy. "After that, Isabella also left. Everyone thinks she's dead." The old man's story was a heavy blow to Elena's mind. Missing? Kidnapped? Isabella's death? These things didn't match what her father had written in the diary. He wrote that he left to protect Isabella and Andrés from a dangerous force. He left them a large sum of money and a secret contact address in the US. What happened? Who was lying? Elena felt confused and panicked. Was the diary a fake? Or was her father deceived? She decided to find an old acquaintance of Isabella's that the old man had pointed out, an old potter living on the outskirts of the town. When Elena arrived, the potter, a small woman with calloused hands, recognized her instantly. She looked into Elena's eyes and whispered, "Santiago's eyes. You have returned." "You," the potter called Elena that. Elena was startled, bewildered. "No, I'm his daughter," Elena said. "I'm Elena." The potter looked at her with great surprise. "That can't be," she said. "You must be Isabella. Your father, Santiago, loved you so much. He told me everything. His name was Santiago Morales, and he came from Mexico to the US to find a new life. He told me about another family, a wife in Chicago. But I thought it was just a story so he could keep his distance. I can't believe he had another life." This confusion bewildered Elena even more. It seemed her father had lived another life in Mexico, with another name and another identity. The potter, whose name was Gabriela, told Elena about the romantic love story between Santiago and Isabella. They met at a festival, and love blossomed at first sight. They lived together for a while, and then Andrés was born. Everything seemed like a fairy tale until a horrible incident occurred. One day, a group of strangers came to the town. They were men in black suits, driving luxury cars. They came to see Santiago and threatened him. They wanted him to pay off a large debt that his own father had left behind. They said that if Santiago didn't pay, they would take Andrés as a hostage. Santiago begged them, saying he had no money. The men laughed at him and said, "Your son will pay for your father's sins." Terrified, Santiago took Isabella and Andrés to a safe hideout, and then he suddenly disappeared. Isabella waited for him to return, day after day, but he never came back. Then, an anonymous letter arrived in Isabella's hands. The letter said that Santiago had died in an accident. Isabella was completely devastated. She believed her love was gone. Heartbroken, she left the town and lived in seclusion. Everyone here believed she was dead. Elena listened to Gabriela's story with a broken heart. Her father, Santiago Reyes, was not a perfect man. He had lived in a world of lies. He had left Isabella and Andrés in Mexico and returned to the US, where he started a new life with her mother. Did he really die in an accident, or did he fake his own death to escape? However, there was still another mystery. If her father had returned to the US, why did he keep the diary and write those painful lines about Isabella and Andrés? Elena flipped through the notebook again, and she realized something terrifying. The last pages of the diary were not words of love, but a confession. Her father wrote that he faked the accident to escape the debt collectors. But he never forgot Isabella and Andrés. He wrote them letters, trying to find a way to bring them to the US, but they never replied. He thought they were dead. The truth stunned Elena. Her father was not a noble man, But he was not a terrible man either. He was just a human who made a terrible mistake and had to live with its consequences. And now she had to face a terrible truth. Isabella was still alive. Where was she? And did she know about her father's secret? Elena knew she had to find Isabella, not just to find the answers to these mysteries, but also to confront the past and the truth about the father she had always revered. Elena decided to search for Isabella. She returned to Mexico City and began a hopeless search. Her father's diary no longer provided any clues. Elena only had a name and a story full of sorrow. She went to the streets, the markets, the places her father might have been. She asked everyone, showing old photos of her father and Isabella. Most people shook their heads, but then an old flower vendor recognized Isabella. She said that Isabella had been living in seclusion in a convent near the city. When Elena arrived at the convent, she saw an old woman with gray hair, gardening. She had big, sparkling eyes, exactly as her father had described in the diary. It was Isabella. Elena approached, and just by looking into Elena's eyes, Isabella recognized her. "Santiago's daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "You have come." Elena and Isabella sat together, and all the truth was revealed. Isabella recounted that after believing Santiago had died, she received another letter from a friend of Santiago's. The letter said that Santiago was alive and in the U.S. But the letter also said he had a new family and didn't want to come back. Isabella was completely devastated. She decided to leave the town, live in seclusion, and cut all ties with the outside world. And Andrés, their son, was not kidnapped. She took the boy to an orphanage and left a large sum of money. She wanted the boy to have a better life, a life that didn't have to face debt collectors and his father's secrets. She believed that by doing so, she was protecting her son. But then, she regretted it. She came back to find her son, but the boy had been adopted by a wealthy American family. She could never find her son again. Elena cried, not because of her own pain, but because of the pain of two other women. Both her mother and Isabella were victims of her father's lies. But in the diary, Elena found something else: remorse. Her father wrote that he tried to contact Isabella and Andrés, but they never replied. He believed they were dead, and that pain haunted him for the rest of his life. The truth was not beautiful. Her father was not a hero, but he was not a terrible man either. He was just a human who made a terrible mistake and had to live with its consequences. When Elena returned to the U.S., she found Andrés, who was adopted and lived a good life. He knew nothing about his birth parents, and Elena decided not to reveal the truth. It was a difficult decision, but she believed it was the right thing to do. Andrés had a happy life, and Elena didn't want to destroy it. She also told her mother the whole story. Clara cried a lot, but then she said she had forgiven her husband. Their love was real, and that truth helped her overcome everything. In the end, this story is not about betrayal or lies. It's about love, forgiveness, and the consequences of the decisions we make. It shows us that our lives are not a perfect book, but a diary full of secrets. We can only choose how we face them. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss other fascinating stories. Thank you for listening.